All right. One other order of business before we check in on quarterbacks. Listeners from back in August and back to last year might be wondering, Ben and Simon, you guys did introductory deep dives on quarterbacks, O-line, front seven, the 7-on-7, wide receiver, tight end, running back guys. Where are the defensive backs? The main answer, really, 80% of the answer is just timing. Like, hey, the college
Right.
football regular season just ended. This is a great time to check in on quarterbacks now that their year is kind of over. Now that we really know a lot about these NFL teams, it's a good chance to just kind of be like, okay, which of these teams are going to need a quarterback? And also, um, this has been a really crazy year in terms of the quarterbacks we were talking about in August
Yeah.
and the ones we're talking about right now. It's completely different in terms of the top three. We still have no idea how many of these guys that we'll even talk about tonight are going to come out in the draft or not. So it's just a good point in the calendar to wade back into those quarterback waters and say, who are we going to talk about again? Right? Because if somebody found the show and was like, well, these guys talked about quarterbacks in August, let's see. And we're talking about Cade Klubnik, Garrett Nussmeier, and Lenore Sellers for the most part.
Yeah.
And two of those guys are third round picks, and one of those guys is in the 2027 draft. They're gonna be like, what's wrong with these guys? They don't know what they're talking about. So we have to check back in on quarterback. But also 20%. I've been working on this thing for like a year, right?
Mhm.
Where I'm not quite sure the value of the really high level defensive back, especially via the draft, right? Because when I'm looking at defensive backs in the draft, when I'm watching film and doing research and stuff, the things that stand out to me and the things that end up translating most on Sundays aren't the things that are generally the traits that get drafted in the first round. I mean, think about when Kyle Hamilton came out and he runs a 4.59 or whatever it is, and he immediately starts falling down boards, and we're like, what are we doing here? And now the guy is the best defensive back in the entire league. Trent McDuffie is an all pro that we'll talk about a little bit here in this research. And he's undersized and he's best as a slot. And like those guys don't always go in the first round. Usually that's like one of the first things that pushes someone down the mocks. He ends up going late in the first round. He's awesome. Um, but for the most part, like you look like the Rams have a hodgepodge defensive back room. They're one of the very, very best defenses in the league. Generally, with defensive back, I've kind of been thinking for a while, like, man, is it just better to have like five dudes back there who will just fly around, hit, and be smart, rather than be the guys with all the ball skills or all the individual athletic traits based on especially now with what we do with the scheme defensively, right? Do you need that true number one shutdown guy anymore? Because that's the guy you generally will get in the first round of the draft. So I wanted to look into that. So I have a couple different avenues I looked into that via that I want to share with you guys tonight. The first one here, let me just give you a synopsis of the guys who have been drafted in the first round for the last few years. So going back to 2021 is how far back I did this research because 2020 COVID year draft, all that was obviously crazy. So let's go to 2021. There have been 22 guys drafted in the first round that are defensive backs. Let's say 19 for tonight's purposes because three of them were this past year and they're still in their rookie year. Jahdae Barron, Malachi Starks, and Malik Harrison, Maxwell Harrison, sorry. Of those 19, six of those guys have earned at least one All Pro season. That's Derek Stingley, Christian Gonzalez, Trent McDuffie, Sauce Gardner, Patrick Surtain, and Kyle Hamilton. An additional three guys have gotten Pro Bowl nods. Devin Witherspoon, J.C. Horn, and oh no, just those two. And then in terms of playoffs, how many of those guys have been on their teams that have drafted them and played in the playoffs? So Hamilton, Surtain have Surtain obviously just the 1 year. McDuffie, yes, obviously. Derek Stingley Jr., yes. Um, Dax Hill, 1 year with the Bengals, his rookie year. He wasn't playing a whole lot at that point. He was kind of like their dime defender, backup at multiple spots at that point. Eric Stokes, 3 years with the Packers. He was their number two across from Jair Alexander for the most part, though. Greg Newsome, that 1 year with Cleveland. Kyer Elam, technically, for the Bills. Obviously, he wasn't playing. Same with a guy like Lewis Cine. Terrion Arnold was the number two for the Lions last year. But Nate Wiggins was probably maybe the Ravens' most consistent corner, especially on the outside last year, and was in the playoffs. And Quinyon Mitchell with the Eagles as well. So what's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 of those 19 have been in the playoffs as first round pick defensive backs, at least one season, with maybe only like three of those guys not being like a significant part of the offense. So when I looked at it, I was like, okay, that's a little more than I thought. And that's about, 30% hit rate in terms of these guys very early in their career, essentially on their rookie deals, becoming all pros, right? As first round picks. So I was like, okay, that's a little better than what I thought. Let's dive a little deeper. What else can we find here? Um, then I wanted to go to who have been the all pros and when were they drafted, right? Because if I'm thinking, hey, I think you can draft and develop a late round pick and he can be really good. Let's see, let's put that to the test. So 2024, the all pros were Patrick Surtain, Derek Stingley, Marlon Humphrey, Xavier McKinney, and Kirby Joseph. So two outside corners, a slot, and two safeties. Three first round picks in those five players, one second round pick, one third round pick. Okay, that skews pretty heavily to first round picks, right? 2023, it was Deron Bland, Sauce Gardner, Trent McDuffie, Kyle Hamilton, Antoine Winfield Jr. Again, three first round picks, one second round, one fifth round. 2022, we didn't have a slot corner all pro, so just four names here. Surtain, Gardner, Minka Fitzpatrick, Talanoa Hufanga, three first round picks, one fifth round pick. And then 2021, Jalen Ramsey, Trayvon Diggs, Kevin Byard, Jordan Poyer, a first, a second, a third, and a seventh round pick.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, if we have about a 30% hit rate for first round picks becoming all pro,
Yeah.
I at some point in their young part of their careers and like 60 to 70% of those guys playing in the playoffs, of those 19 names I mentioned before. And I mean, if you even wanted to talk about the three that were just drafted this year that I said I wasn't including, right? Jahdae Barron is going to be in the playoffs, but he's not playing significant snaps. Malachi
Right.
Starks, playoff significant snaps. Maxwell Harrison, if he's healthy for the Bills, he's going to be playing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then those all pros, for the most part, are first round picks. So then here's what's really important. Over the last four seasons, I took the teams that played in the divisional round of the playoffs. So not just who snuck into the wild card and got blown out, who made it to the second round of the playoffs. In 2021, only two of the eight teams in the divisional round had a first round defensive back. And I think those were Tre'Davious White with the Bills and then Jimmy Ward with the 49ers, right? Those guys were both drafted in 2017. So they were like 4 year vets
Mhm.
at that point.
Yeah.
In 2022, one team, one player, Trent McDuffie with the Chiefs. 2023, there were three teams. 2024, just last season, five of the eight teams in the divisional round had first round pick defensive backs. A lot of them we've mentioned already. Derek Stingley, Kyle Hamilton, Trent McDuffie, Quinyon Mitchell, and Terrion Arnold. So, Ben, I throw a lot of this at you, and if you're a listener or a viewer, that was a lot for me to throw at you. I can always comment with the research, and so you can read it as well if you want. Um, what does this mean to you? Was my assumption off base that it's not super important to have a high value draft pick invested in DB? Or I don't know, do you think this research bears out the other way that, hey, we should be doing this? You do need a top guy back there. What do you think?
Okay, so I love the research, first of all. That's really good. I mean, that's excellent. It's not even quite as good as what you put out on our Pro Football Entertainment show the other week with the coaching staffs, but this is very
I
close to
always save
that.
the best for you, Ben. I
Yes,
always keep the best in the tank for your
that's
show.
why we love you, Simon. Thank you so much. So, I feel like your assumption still holds up. Now, maybe I probably don't wouldn't carry it as far as you probably would carry it if you were building a football team, right? I still feel like your basic assumption holds up, and that is I'd rather build a secondary defensive back room than to just have one guy and hope the rest works itself out. I
Mhm.
feel like I have too many holes that way. So, given a choice, and again, every team is different, every draft is different, every free agent class is different. Okay, given a choice, I'd rather have some top edge rushers with a decent secondary that, like you said, is smart, physical, flies to the football. Um, but when you look at this data, it also illustrates to me two things. Number one, if you really want a top flight guy, you're going to have to get one of the first one or two defensive backs every
Hmm.
year off the board because NFL teams are doing a pretty good job of grabbing those guys fairly early. Maybe not
Yep.
always the first guy, but in the first two or three guys. And that may not even be top 10. That might be 14th pick and 23rd pick, right? But NFL teams are doing a fairly good job of identifying the athletes that can play in the secondary at the NFL level. So if you do want a top one, you're probably going to have to grab them early. The other thing that does stand out here, and you mentioned it, is all a lot of first round heavy stuff here. It really is. But you can have playoff success without one too. You know that
Hmm.
there's enough here in the mix. There's enough, man. There's enough teams winning Super Bowls without a top notch, you know, single cover guy. A lot of this has to do with the fact that so many teams want to play zone because they're scared of getting beat over the top and they're scared of all the rub routes that NFL teams are doing. That's really the two things. And, getting beat over the top, nobody wants that. So that's why you drop back into zone. And then all the rub routes that they do versus man, nobody wants that. So you drop back into zone, right? And when you're dropping back into zone, while that one-on-one top-notch cover guy is still valuable, it does lose its value, right? If you're going to play zone all the freaking time, then why invest a top pick in a top cover guy? I'll just invest those picks in some edge rushers and we'll figure it out on the backside. So those are the two things that really stand out there. I do feel like your assumption holds up for any NFL team that just wants to build a solid defensive back room, solid guys playing smart zones and then dropping into man when it befits them. That still holds up. But you're right here. Looking at the data, man, you get a top guy, it does help. It sure seems to help on some of these teams. Some of these teams.
Now, some of this research is flawed, right? I didn't do second team all
Yeah,
pros.
always.
So
Right.
would that be some variance? I didn't
Yeah.
track the percentage of teams in the divisional round with first round pick for every position, right?
Hmm.
Um, because maybe if even if five of the teams last year had first round pick DBs, maybe eight of the teams last year had first round pick defensive linemen, and maybe
Hmm.
seven also had first round pick receivers, right?
Right.
So if that number is still higher across the board for all the other positions, because one thing I was thinking about with those names specifically, for the most part, those teams were still built inside out first, right?
Right.
Before McDuffie was drafted to the Chiefs, they had Mahomes, they had an interior offensive line, they had tackles. I know we didn't love them, but they had
Right.
tackles. They had
Yep.
Chris Jones. Um, was Karlaftis the draft before McDuffie, or was he 23? He might have been 23.
I lose
Um,
track. Yeah.
but they had an O line, they had a D line, they had a quarterback, they had an infrastructure of the offensive system at that point still, even if Tyreek Hill wasn't there. Quinion Mitchell to the Eagles, same thing.
Hmm.
Offensive line, defensive line, quarterback skill guys. And then, because remember, they like defensive back was their one weakness going into that draft last 2 seasons ago, two drafts ago now. And they attacked it with those two picks, Mitchell and DeJean, and they filled in that whole defensive back room just like that. I remember the last time they were in real heavy Super Bowl contention, they were getting high level play from Slay and Bradbury, but they were still built primarily from the
Yeah,
inside
they
out.
were. Yep.
The Ravens, Lamar Jackson, Ronnie Stanley, Derrick Henry, Matt Ibuke. Who else did they have before Hamilton? I think they might have traded for Roquan Smith in Kyle Hamilton's rookie year. So that's a little different. Hamilton was a 14th overall pick versus Mitchell and McDuffie, who are both in the 20s. And then Derek Stingley is kind of the one odd man out, right? They draft him third overall the year before they draft Stroud and Will Anderson.
Hmm.
Um, but obviously they draft Stingley third overall, and then they're drafting second overall the next season, right? So like
Right.
they weren't a finished product before the quarterback and the edge rusher came in. So if I flipped it around and made it a little more holistic, I do wonder what I would see. But what I will say is I don't think what I think the research tells me is it's not as much of a prohibitor of success as I maybe thought it would be. Like, oh, if we're using our draft picks on first round pick, or if we're using our first round draft picks on defense back, that's going to limit what you're going to be because you need other stuff. But again, these teams mostly
Yeah.
had other stuff already, especially the quarterback before they had success. So just something interesting. It's not fully fledged out, but I wanted to let people know kind of where my mind was when I was making the calendar. I was, just trying to eliminate one other position group that I could year by year.